At a quick glance, it's easy to mistake this game for an ill-fated Resident Evil project, what with its fixed camera angles and dashing blonde pistol-toting protagonists. But you'd be wrong. It is in fact a game published by, not Capcom, but Ubisoft of all people. Nowadays it's hard not to associate that name with large open world games packed with tedious busywork. It's hard to believe, but Ubisoft had a proper survival horror game that rivaled the likes of Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Cold Fear was a survival horror game from a French developer called Darkworks. You may know them from titles such as the 2001 classic Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, and also lesser known survival horror called I Am Alive. I know, I probably just unlocked a core memory in some of you guys just now. A lot of you probably have no idea what the hell this even is. For the few of you who are sitting back in their chair with two fingers on their temples thinking, what the hell ever happened to this game? Yeah, I'm right there with you. But getting back to Darkworks, I'm Alive would be their final project before officially closing in 2011. And if you look at all three games' critic review scores, you notice that they all land roughly in the 70% mark. But if you consider the user scores, they tell a different story. Cold Fear comes out on top with an outstanding score of 90% on Metacritic, and there's a good reason for that. You see, at the heart of all 7 out of 10 games, there's always a good idea or concept for a game, but failing to execute on these ideas is what knocks them down a few pegs, landing on that 7 out of 10 score. Before we go any further, I'd hugely appreciate a like on this video, to appease the YouTube gods and get some traction on it. With that said, let's get back to it.
Morning party, this is the Ravenswood. The seas are too rough. We're gonna have to head back. You're on your own, people.
Part of why I believe so many people took to this game is because of its incredibly enticing setup and opening moments. It starts off when a team of Special Forces operatives are deployed onto a mysterious Russian whaling vessel, where they are immediately attacked by something. All we catch is a glimpse of a soldier being dropped a new one until it cuts back to the handler, in which case he puts out a distress signal asking anyone and everyone in the nearby vicinity to investigate. In steps Tom Hansen, captain of the USS Ravenswood, who answers the distress signal and heads out with his team to report on the situation. Upon arriving at the vessel, the gang decides to take a page out of the old Scooby-Doo handbook and split up the instant they get there. Naturally, things go tits up almost immediately. And unluckily for our gang, these monsters are nothing like the Scooby-Doo villains we see in cartoons. So they're not gonna hogtie you and leave you for the rest of the gang to rescue you. No, you're gonna get fucked up and left on the crapper for Tom to discover. It's here that we get our first taste of whatever it is that happened to the US Navy specialists. These zombie-like monsters have clearly taken over the ship and now aware of your presence on it. After a rather brutal execution of a Russian soldier, the zombie sets its eyes on you, and I think I speak for all of us when I say, I did not expect this thing to come at me full sprint Usain Bolt style. This was extremely terrifying and super effective because it flips the traditional introduction trope on its head. So many times in this genre do we see an intro to the enemy where the camera will zoom up on them and they'll do a slow turn. Then when it cuts to gameplay, they'll do a slow shuffle towards you, or in some cases, you can back out and just bail on the whole situation. But here, there's no time to react, so you end up just blasting and hoping for the best.
I started blasting. Bah! Bah!
In my opinion, Cold Fear opens up really strong with the setup. The setting is another contributor as to why the game is remembered so fondly. Having the game set on a whaling vessel in the middle of the ocean all the while a violent storm batters the ship is a chef's kiss in setting the tone for a survival horror experience. This is something I've said before, but why aren't we seeing more horror games set on an abandoned ghost ship? This is such an easy W for horror game devs. Please, we need to see more horror games on creepy ships. But when it comes to Cold Fear, they've done more than simply set the game on a ship. You see, navigating the ship becomes a treacherous undertaking when the storm starts acting up. Occasionally, large waves will crash against the sides of the ship, causing it to sway and send you flying across the deck if you aren't anchored to the railing. Also, if you find yourself at the edge of the ship, the waves will splash on board, smashing you against the wall and dealing massive damage. Additionally, there are swinging obstacles like heavy crates that sway with the motion of the ship, also capable of dealing heavy damage to the player. When all these elements combine, it really gives you the sense that you are aboard a dangerously unsafe ship in the midst of a hostile storm. This is that 7 out of 10 charm I was talking about. These ideas are truly clever and ahead of their time in a sense, but ultimately fell short of their full potential. As cool as the features are, Darkworks failed to capitalize on them. Mainly because only about 10% of the game takes place on the outside of the ship. As long as you're indoors, none of these features carry over, apart from one puzzle, where the room was flooded and you had to time the swaying of the motion of the ship so that the water was safe to wade through. This was a really simple yet thematically appropriate puzzle, and I really hoped this creativity was more present in the rest of the game. Now that we're all set up, let's discuss how does the game actually play. Well, like I mentioned earlier, this game is mostly experienced from fixed camera angles, but you can switch to it over the shoulder third person perspective when you hold up your weapon. Otherwise, if you really want that old school horror feel, you can keep the fixed camera angle while aiming. The problem with this is sometimes enemies will be off screen in the distance and you won't know what you're aiming at. From the way levels are designed, that being quite large and open rooms, I don't think this perspective lends itself well to the combat encounters. That being said, I don't think I've ever used this option, also I've never seen anyone else use it, but it's always nice to have it, I guess. Plus, the over the shoulder view goes so well with survival horror, as evidenced by all the remakes and remasters. Why would you use anything else? The feeling of popping these zombies in the head, or exocells as they call it in this game, still feels incredibly satisfying nearly 20 years later. There's something about a pistol with a laser sight that gets the happy juices flowing, you know? As for the other weapons, while not a huge selection, they are varied enough to keep things interesting. Though one weird thing I noticed with some of the weapons, namely the shotgun, grenade launcher and flamethrower, is that they don't come with a laser or even an on-screen crosshair. These make for some awkward combat encounters where it becomes difficult to judge exactly where you're aiming. And I don't mean to be Captain Obvious here, but knowing where you're aiming is extremely important. That goes doubly for this game, because you can pump as many bullets in these guys as you like, but if you don't hit him in the brain, you ain't killing him. Going forward, this is where I'll be getting into spoiler territory, so if you plan to play Cold Fear, you have been warned. So, as per the title of this video, I suggested this game deserves a remake. With the video game industry currently going through this nostalgia bait / safe bet phase, where everything under the sun is getting a remaster, it seems likely that the needle will eventually fall on Cold Fear. And with the 20th anniversary coming up next year, that might happen sooner rather than later. Up to now, I've described what some might call a perfect survival horror game, but that's only half the story. You see, where the game gets the tone, setting and overall feel of the game right, they end up falling short in many other regards. Starting with what I believe is the main issue with this game, the story. If you are a fan of this game and maybe return to it every now and then, chances are you aren't doing it for the story. The plot can be summed up in very few words. Answer distress call, find woman on ship, blow up facility, escape. Now, obviously it's not as simple as that, but it's not far off either. You see, most of the interesting story beats are found in documents detailing the events of an experiment. At its core, there is a story here involving the Russian mafia and dormant subterranean alien life forms. Unfortunately, the damsel in distress narrative takes center stage. The problem is, even that part of the story is weak. It's delivered at an oddly rapid pace and doesn't give you any time to actually care about what's happening on screen. A huge contributing factor is the campy voice acting that can only be described as of the time.
Anna?
Who are you? What are you doing here?
My name is Tom Hansen. I'm a friend.
Why should I believe you?
Because I'm here and you're not dead.
Ha, funny. Where is Dmitri?
Yusupov's dead.
Good. The bastard deserved it.
So can you tell me what the hell is going on here? He said you had some answers.
He lied. I don't have answers.
Then who does?
Papa does. We can radio him. He will know what to do.
But the unusual story pacing can't be completely blamed on the weird voice acting. The game itself is incredibly short, clocking in at around the 5-hour mark. While that in itself is not uncommon, just look at last year's Call of Duty campaign. It's rare in that it actively tries to hinder your progress. What I mean is, the game is set on a Russian ship, so all the rooms are labelled in Russian. Luckily our protagonist is fluent in the language, so reading labels is not really an issue for him. Though for us as players, when it's not annoyingly finicky to line up your aim with the labels, it becomes increasingly difficult to mentally map out all these rooms through quick glances at the names. And keep in mind, running between these rooms is not seamless. There's a short loading period when entering the new space, not to mention the constantly shifting perspectives, further disorienting the player. With the amount of backtracking you end up doing, it becomes a real problem. This would not be an issue at all if the game gave you any kind of reference as to where you are in the level. If you haven't noticed by now, there is no minimap on screen, or in the menu, or at any point on the level where you can refer to. Not even one of those little maps you sometimes find in hospitals that say, "You are here." You see, I believe the game did this on purpose. Not to immerse you in the world or anything, but to simply pad out time. Whoa! When it comes to updating a game like Cold Fear, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be like Resident Evil 4, Dead Space or Silent Hill 2. These games all had solid foundations. Cold Fear is going to need a complete reimagining of the story if it's going to compete with today's standards. Ideally, what I would like to see in my perfect remake of this game goes as follows. Keep the perspectives as is, fixed as you move around the ship, over the shoulder when you're in combat. Gunplay can remain as is for the most part, just make sure to add a reticle for some of the other guns. The atmosphere and tone of the first 20 minutes of this game is so strong in my opinion, and a lot of that comes from the storm itself. So what I would like to see is them take it a step further, make your footing unsteady, have freak waves come in and smash against the ship, but more importantly, make the swaying of the ship a more prominent factor. Have it include puzzles and give me a reason to brace for impact. Story, like I mentioned, will need a complete overhaul and some added length. Something else that I noticed was the lack of bosses. The one and only boss in the game was absolute dog shit and could use a more engaging fight. And finally, we're gonna need some sort of map. It doesn't have to be a mini-map, it can be more like Silent Hill 2 if you're worried about immersion. Look, remaking this game will not be an easy task, but I really hope they take the remake route over simply updating the visuals. With the current state of gaming industry, a remaster is more likely than a reboot, but I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed anyway. What? Well, that's gonna be it for this one. You know what to do, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and also let me know in the comments, did you play this game? Did you play it when you were young and nope out like I did? I remember playing this game and I got scared shitless and I just put it off. Never came back to it until like 17 years later. That's gonna be it for this one. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.